Welcome to the Death Panel. Today, as you all know, is October 7th, a day that means many things to many people. To the US, the settler state occupying historical Palestine, Fortress Europe, and the broader Western imperial hegemon, October 7th is a day that they've seemingly decided is the very beginning of history, the first day that anything of relevance to the occupation of Palestine happened, and the single day that somehow is supposed to justify the escalating annihilatory violence that has, as of today, rained down on Palestine for 1 full year. A genocide that can continue only because we continue to send the very artillery that the settler state is using in their attempt to crush Palestine. October 7th has become the day that U.S. empire demands we all atone for, a day that we must all renounce, and a day that is supposed to have justified this year of ceaseless torment, a day that the settler colonies both here and in Palestine have continually spun as some inhuman act of hate, a day that they need to deny the meaning of in order to pretend to justify the mass murder that we've all witnessed. There are going to be a lot of people trying to say something profound today, from every angle imaginable. Just last week, the New York Times' Bret Stephens used his soapbox in the Times opinion page to declare, quote, "We absolutely need to escalate in Iran." The Wall Street Journal did them one better, writing, quote, "What the Jewish state has done in the past year for its own defense, but in the process and not coincidentally for the security of all of us, will rank among the most important contributions to the defense of Western civilization in the past 3/4 of a century," unquote. And this is, of course, far from relegated to the opinion pages. Just days ago, Politico reported that, quote, "Top U.S. national security officials are describing Israel's Lebanon operations as a history-defining moment, one that will reshape the Middle East for the better for years to come." Many have already said that this increasingly feels like 2003 all over again, and as someone whose first experience with mass protest was in the context of the War on Terror, I tend to agree. Except this time, of course, the sitting president is not a Republican, not the son of a former CIA director, or a president installed by a fiat of the Supreme Court. It's Biden and Harris, who have claimed for months they've worked tirelessly on a ceasefire, even as they continue to send weapon after weapon after weapon to the settler state. So we here at Death Panel have thought long and hard about how we wanted to address this day. And ultimately, we're joining the calls of organizers around the world in calling for a general strike. I'm recording this on the 6th. It'll be up the morning of the 7th. And today, the morning of the 7th, we will be masking up and joining any actions that we can and encourage you to do the same. So there's no new episode today, at least in a traditional sense. But at the same time, we do feel a need to both mark the time, the immense burden of 1 year of genocide, and to mark and reiterate the meaning of this anniversary, a day that we've been encouraged to see as stripped of meaning. So we ourselves don't have anything profound to say today, but what we do want to do is highlight the work and words of others that have helped us find clarity and resolve in the past year. Because while it's important to mark the passing of a year, it's equally important to know that there is still no end in sight and that this has been going on for much longer than just the last year. I have a few things to read and an interview to share at the end of this, but the first is a text that we've come back to frequently, a piece by Rawan Masri published October 13th, 2023 in Mondoise, just days after Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, the act of resistance that has for the last year always, exclusively, been referred to simply as October 7th. So this piece is called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was an act of decolonization. Masri writes, "Decolonization is disruptive. It is a disruption to the status quo of the subjugation of the racialized and thus dehumanized indigenous masses for the benefit of the settler colonial class. It is a process that necessarily entails upheaval, social unrest, and conflict, paving the way for a new social and political order that reflects the aspirations and values of the liberated people. Algeria, Haiti, and Vietnam's years of bloody struggle all came to mind more than ever for Palestinians this week. In all these cases, their peoples courageously fought juggernauts of military power. They were told these powers were undefeatable, that they were undeserving of ruling themselves and controlling their own destinies, and that they would find the price too high to pay. Scorched earth tactics and guerrilla warfare flipped the power dynamics on their heads. The very infrastructure that had been used to exploit and suppress them was used to the revolutionaries' advantage. In the case of the Vietnam Tet Offensive in particular, the timing, scope, coordination, media coverage, and psychological impact of their resilience eroded public support for the war. Could we perhaps bear witness to the same phenomenon today? In all these cases, their peoples decimated the physical and ideological barriers standing in the way of the new world they knew was on the horizon. Palestinians, too, will reach this new world. Much of the commentary around the Al-Aqsa flood operation, where Palestinian resistance fighters from Gaza broke free from the concentration camp we know as the Gaza Strip, dismisses or outright ignores two things that every Palestinian knows to be true. 1. There is no form of violence that Israel can hope to punish us with for the first time now. Massacres, home demolitions, life imprisonment sentences where prisoners are tortured and sexually assaulted, blockade and siege, execution in the streets. Over and over again, we watch funeral after funeral, and we know that in horror we will see many more. 2. We do not intend to remain a population of oppressed refugees and prisoners and denied access to the land that is our way of life forever. Palestinian resistance is paving the way for the end of this violence and denial of land that has been Israeli colonialism. This end is the beginning of Palestinians rebuilding our villages that were destroyed in the many massacres of 1948. It will be reparations to compensate for our homes that we were robbed of, and everything stolen to bolster their libraries and museums from the Palestinians who were ethnically cleansed and, to this day, are deemed absentees. It will be us finally accessing our beautiful nature to farm and enjoy, free of the colonial bureaucratic structure in place currently preventing this. It will allow us to undo the political brainwashing that our lives are less full and deserving of being lived because we are not Jewish. This includes proving wrong the greenwashing that we don't deserve the land because we don't know how to take care of it, and that they made the desert bloom when really all they did was take our homeland and turn it into a series of heavily surveilled ghettos. This will all start with land back, this call to return land to indigenous peoples. Jasbir Puar, an indigenous scholar, defines land back as, quote, a call for the return of indigenous lands and a reimagining of indigenous relations to the land, centered on autonomy and consent. It is essential to decolonization because of how central it is to creating a new political and economic order for the indigenous rather than at their expense. Fanon put it in concrete terms, quote, for a colonized people, the most essential value is first and foremost the land which will bring them bread and, above all, dignity. The resistance fighters came from the Gaza Strip, where the vast majority of the population are refugees ethnically cleansed from their villages, many of which have been destroyed and had settlements built over their remains. They have since been shoved into camps, where rather than having bread and dignity, they are denied access to food, water, and medicine. They have been living at the whim of the settlers who built their lives on the remains of their villages and land. From the moment those fighters flew in on paramotors, disrupting the parallel reality that was this music festival, they accomplished something profound. One must wonder what it felt like for these fighters to see a party just outside where they have been trapped under a suffocating blockade. They reimagined their relation to the land not as something in the distance, but as a tangible place for them to set foot in. They entered the rest of their homeland not through a checkpoint, hoping to be granted a permit, but as a force to be reckoned with. They were autonomous, enacting their will by force against this population of heavily militarized settlers, the vast majority of whom have, quote-unquote, served or are currently in the Israeli military where careers are made out of Palestinian suffering and death. That one moment when a Palestinian, for once, bulldozer, took down the fence was decolonization in practice. That fence and the snipers behind it defending the settler colonial order were overcome. The Palestinian resistance did nothing less than lay a groundwork for the end of violent Israeli rule over our lands. They did so by employing a violence to end the root cause of the oppression of Palestinians, not do another spin of the so-called cycle. As Paulo Freire put it, violence has already begun, quote, with the establishment of a relationship of oppression. Never in history has violence been initiated by the oppressed. How could they be the initiators if they themselves are the result of violence? Or as Palestinian author Mourid Bourgouti put it, the resistance rejected starting the story with, quote-unquote, secondly. Quote, start your story with secondly, and the arrows of the Native Americans are the original criminals, and the guns of the white men are entirely the victim. It is enough to start with secondly, for the anger of the black man against the white to be barbarous, and the burned Vietnamese will have wounded the humanity of the napalm, and Victor Jara's songs will be the shameful thing and not Pinochet's bullets. It is enough to start the story with secondly for my grandmother, Ata, to become the criminal and Ariel Sharon her victim, unquote. Starting the story with firstly has made some uncomfortable. This is a testament to the decades of hegemony building around who has the monopoly on violence. This same monopoly decrees who gets to be seen as full people with lives and loved ones and who are treated as numbers. Over and over again, in the West in particular, Palestinians have been relegated to the latter. Some of those appalled by armed Palestinian resistance and unable to see it for the defense that it is, perhaps see themselves reflected in the Israeli settler soldier rather than the Palestinian fighter. They may do so either because of their own role in a settler society or because they have never had to try to grapple with the physical and psychological existential threat level of violence Palestinians have been subjected to all our lives. Regardless, someone who thought decolonization would be an act of telekinesis or who only thinks about us when we're trending is in no position to lecture. Many Palestinians would have preferred to see the walls come down through boycotts and petitions and the other endless tried and not true methods we have long been undertaking. But it was not the Palestinians who decided things had to be this way. Poetry and social media posts have gotten us imprisoned. We have marched unarmed and been met with tear gas and bullets. We have watched our children be put through military court and our people and their bodies be pulled from under rubble as they have been again and again and again in Gaza. Palestinians know this annihilatory violence is being inflicted on the Palestinians of Gaza as this is being written. We also understand that when Israelis make jokes on TikTok about having access to water and electricity and about how new real estate is opening up, it is the logical conclusion of Zionist settler colonialism. As much of Palestinian land with as few Palestinians alive left on it. But we have hope, because we know, now more than ever, that these horrors in the name of upholding a racist settler colonial occupation are not going to last forever. Anyone who ever thought it would will be astounded in hindsight. So again, that was Rawan Masri's piece from October 13th, 2023, called Operation Al-Aqsa Flood was an act of decolonization. And this text is not the only one to make these points necessarily, but I do think that regardless, it is a very helpful one to remind ourselves very simply what October 7th was actually about and what it actually was, and what this year of death raining down on Palestine has been in reaction to all along. Just as we see university crackdowns and state and local mass bans being meted out here in the US in an attempt to silence us, this entire year has been this lashing out of entitled colonial aggression against any group, really, that would stand against subjugation, whether of themselves or otherwise. As the group The Bad Side wrote just weeks ago, quote, any worthwhile analysis has to start from the searing fact that so far nothing we've done has worked. We, meaning the 1 million+ people who have taken action for Gaza in the US, worked meaning stopped the killing. A year of marches, rallies, and sabotage has so far failed to end the genocide or even slow the delivery of bombs. It's with full knowledge of this screaming stasis that we offer a reflection on the encampments of the past spring. We see them as an awesome phenomenon. Nothing so far has worked, but nothing has struck back at the matrix of imperial interests and ideologies with the force, breadth, and fearlessness of the students and their allies, who sent panic and hatred pulsing through every rank of the establishment. Nobody could be surprised that the official response was so self-righteous and briskly violent. The real shock was the scale and the crashing tyrannical spectacle that so many administrations saw reason to call in municipal and even state police forces, that so many university presidents approved crackdowns whose live-streamed sadism would be a PR nightmare. This zeal was already bizarre. that snipers stood watch on rooftops at Ohio State and Indiana, that an NYPD officer at Columbia shot live ammunition into Heinz Hall, that the throngs of bat-wielding fascists who descended upon UCLA were first met with collegial courtesy by the cops who the next day made over 200 vicious arrests over the course of shredding the camp. Together they add up to a picture of how the will to obliterate Palestine has ramifications for every layer of organized power. It's not just the effect of a single lobby, though that obviously exists. Support for this genocide is now a feature of a massive and thickly integrated reactionary alliance. By trying to slash its financial sinews, the camps laid bare its vigor and size." Unquote. And of course, in recent weeks, the colonial backlash has broadened into Lebanon and threatening to expand into an invasion of Iran. And just like with Palestine before the bombing started in Lebanon, in the pager attacks, we saw the settler state's familiar tactic of deliberate disablement and debilitation, what Jasbir Puar termed the right to maim. As Jasbir wrote to the public source just weeks ago, quote, "I think the right to maim is functioning as South African advocate Tembeka Unkungadhobi explained in the testimony he delivered at the International Court of Justice hearings in January, where he stated that Israel will maim, quote, what it cannot destroy. In prior iterations, the cannot was about the restraint of force or the appearance of disproportionate force. But now the cannot, both in Gaza and Lebanon, appear to be about logistical constraints, and in that sense, it might be perhaps only a marker of time, as in, we cannot yet destroy. The recent horrific attacks on southern Lebanon and in Beirut, killing hundreds of people, indicate that the right to maim and the right to kill are no longer in a supplementary relation, one modulating or covering for the other, but rather both are explicitly enacted as strategies of violent decimation. In instances past, maiming was a tactic to minimize death, placating global actors while nevertheless creating huge harm through mass impairment. The tactic was explicit at times, for instance during the First Intifada, and covert at other times. For instance, the number of injured in Israel's 2014 Gaza war was rarely noted, as there was so much grief about the number of dead. In this case, I think the nature of the spectacle, which involves the fetishization of dismembered body parts, is crucial because it is tutoring international audiences in the value hierarchy between Israeli and Palestinian and Lebanese bodies. It appears akin to the mass injuries sustained during the 2018 to 2020 Great March of Return, during which Western mainstream media routinely printed images of rows of Palestinian men with amputated legs in wheelchairs and bandaged and on crutches. Throughout this spectacle, the amputated limb has become a signature injury, a carceral assemblage of the humanitarian use of maiming, the media focus on disaster capitalism, and the tactical attempt to contain resistance. Signature injuries are to some extent biopolitically preordained. A particular injury becomes what a certain body is known for, what it is expected to receive and assimilate, even before it happens to the body. I feel that what is being normalized is the mass impairment through the most horrifying dismemberment of body parts of Palestinian and now Lebanese bodies as the value of these bodies, as what these bodies deserve and are destined for. In that sense, the humanitarian rationale is no longer needed. Only the collective witnessing, tutoring, absorption, and sanctioning of a global audience that is only too happy to have their racist, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian worldviews confirmed. It is as if to say, if these bodies are to remain alive, they must only be alive as mutilated. Unquote. So it's with this last piece in mind from Jasbir Puar that today's episode, the remainder of it, will be Bea and Jules' conversation with Jasbir Puar about her book, The Right to Maim, recorded long before October 7th, but no less relevant now. And I'll add that while this conversation is remarkably salient today, if you're listening to this and perhaps on your way to an action or even just worrying about whether there's anything that you can do, then if you haven't yet, please listen to our recent live session with Rasha Abduhadi from the Socialism Conference, the episode titled Refusing Genocide from Palestine to Pandemic. Rasha says in that recording that their goal in that talk was to leave you feeling more possible, more oriented towards what could be possible in the actions that you take, including those that no one ever sees or knows about. So we highly recommend that episode. As for us, as I mentioned earlier, we're on strike today, along with many of you, and we hope to see you out there. And if you can't strike today or engage in other actions, the Gaza municipal government still does deeply need your support in funding repairs to critical water infrastructure, whether that support is in the form of a donation or just in boosting their campaign. So that link is in the episode description. So that's what we have to add for today. I can't fucking believe that we're here, but we are. So it's on all of us to do everything in our power to undo it. Patrons, will see you Thursday in the main feed, and make sure to stick around for the rest of this recording for our interview with Jasbir. Free Palestine, and as always, stay alive another week.